Welcome, everyone, to another Spotlight interview. Today, we are excited to chat with Dr. Jaye Gardiner, a postdoctoral fellow and a soon to be professor at Tufts University. Now that she's coming off the job market, she's here today to talk about what being on the academic job market is like. So, welcome, Dr. Gardiner, and thank you for agreeing to be here today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. To start us off, could you tell us a bit about yourself and your academic career to date?
Yes. I have to do it in the most me fashion. So I have a zine, but to make it, visible for a recording, I put it in a PowerPoint. So let me just share my screen really fast. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm gonna have the Gardner Lab. I'm super excited. So I'll be opening doors September 2025, so next fall. Um, but I made this little zine for one part of the job market that's called a chalk talk, which is where you talk about all of your future directions. But not everyone that goes to your chalk talk saw your seminar, which is where you talk about all of your postdoctoral or past work. So I kind of made this zine as a way to be able to show the trajectory of how I got there and also my future direction. So this is the cover, and it just folds up to like from a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper into like a little 2 by 3 inch like little booklet. Um, so this is my lab. Um, and so the way that I got here is that my PhD was actually in virology. So about 10 years ago or more than, I really had this idea to start work on the viral microenvironment. So if you've heard of the tumor microenvironment, so you have tumor cells, but then everything around it that can support that cancerous cell to grow, kind of the same idea, but with virology. So if you have a cell that is infected by a virus, what else is happening in that environment that is either being changed as a result of that infection or is helping that infection like take place and gives all of the symptoms that we might have in our body. And so this idea kind of started during my PhD, where I worked on HIV and studied the interactions between cells from the viral entry protein called ONV. And basically, if I had ONV in the system, the interactions were much longer and the cells were much more stationary than when I didn't. My thesis committee really kind of pushed my ideas. So one of them, the late Dr. Patricia Keeley, so all of these are illustrations that I did too, just to note. She is a fantastic tumor microenvironment researcher, specifically in breast cancer. And she really encouraged me to kind of look more at the ECM because these videos that I would show, she was just like, oh, that would definitely be changing the extracellular matrix. And another one of my committee members, Dr. Bill Sugden, he really emphasized me doing my postdoc in a different field so that I can combine the two together when it's time for me to have my own lab. So because of that, I switched from being a virologist, so this was my grad PI, Dr. Nathan Shearer, to now my postdoc PI, Dr. Etty Sukerman, at the Fox Chase Cancer Center to really learn more about the ECM and how cells interact with them. And something that Eddie did during her postdoc was actually create an in vitro system that allows us to take fibroblasts that we can isolate from human patients and have them grow their own physiological extracellular matrix. And it keeps the same morphology and properties that they do as when it was inside a patient, which is really cool. So now I'm working on pancreatic cancer and specifically what's called a cancer-associated fibroblast, so CAF, because basically the tumor microenvironment of pancreatic cancer is all fibroblasts and ECM, or at least the majority of it is actually very, very little of the tumor cells. So this diagram is just kind of how we produce these cell-derived matrices or units if we talk about both the fibroblasts and the ECM together. But from doing this work, so everything that we do in the lab is using this system to kind of have a more physiological relevant than just putting fibroblasts on a hard plastic petri dish that can artificially activate them and kind of change their biology. And from doing that, I found that there were a lot of aberrantly expressed genes. So one of the things that the lab found before I joined was that there's this neuronal protein called Netrin G1 that's being expressed in these fibroblasts for some reason, and it's only in the disease state. If we have more of Netrin G1 for patients in the fibroblasts, it negatively correlates with their overall survival. So more Netrin G1 equals worse survival. So I kind of took that to try and figure out what is causing that, or if we can find other things that are being regulated by Netrin G1, or just what's different between these fibroblasts that are high and low expressing. And now I found that there's an endothelial kinase that is being expressed on these fibroblasts for some reason. So it's all of these things are just starting to be expressed in places you wouldn't expect them to be, which kind of drove my curiosity into how this is being regulated. And so if we look at how fibroblasts connect with the ECM, it's through an extracellular protein called an integrin. A different paper in the lab showed that if we got rid of one integrin subunit, so the beta 5 subunit, you lose its connection. The fibroblast is now normalized. It's not doing all of these tumor supporting things that it normally does. But if I look at what's unique to if we do RNA sequencing from knocking out this beta 5 subunit, a lot of these epigenetic chromatin remodeler, so things that would actually allow for access to the genes, are being changed. And so that's kind of part of the direction that I want to take my lab. But specifically, kind of combining all of these things. So looking at how viral infection, so taking my PhD, can epigenetically rewire these cells to maybe change how they're interacting with host cells in the ECM. So things from my postdoc, and using that as a lens to collectively see how this is changing disease progression, be it just the disease from the virus causing more fibrosis, since I am very ECM focused, or if it's in a different way, like contributing to cancers in ways that we didn't think of before. And so this was kind of all the different pages of the little book. And then if you unfolded it, it showed what my overall model is. So this in the center here is kind of the working model of how I think things are happening and what I'm going to be using as a baseline to kind of test different hypotheses. So you can have viral infection that activates the cells. It creates that feedback loop and secreting different things that can lead to tumor growth and development. But also during this process, this is where things are getting epigenetically changed. And I kind of left these speech bubbles kind of like Post-it notes so that people could take notes during my talk. All the different techniques that I'll be using in my lab, the types of questions that we'll be asking, but also, as you noticed, I do a lot of drawing. I have another aspect is doing different STEM ed and outreach type stuff, and doing some research in that realm as well. So a little bit long-winded, but that is both how I got there and what I'm going to be doing in the future.
No, thank you very much. This was great, and I love how it showcases more than just your research, but also shows a lot about you too.
Yes. Figuring out. There we go. Stop sharing. Okay.
Perfect. So with that, we can get into our set of questions that we have for you today. The first one being, can you describe what it's like being on the faculty job market? And in particular, what was the hardest part and what was the easiest part?
Yeah. It's really hard. Probably like doing any sort of career change, it's hard. So like going from high school to college and figuring out what you want to do as a major is hard. Going from college to grad school and figuring out just doing grad school is hard. Going from grad school to a postdoc and now you don't have a cohort and you're the only one that's entering at that time is hard. So each transition part is really hard. The thing that makes being on the job market especially hard is that your other responsibilities don't stop. So you have to write all of these materials. So there's a research statement where you detail your past work and everything that you want to do in the future. You typically have to write a teaching statement. There's also a DEI statement, so how you're going to help make the workforce better. You have your cover letter, your CV, getting all of your letters of rec, and then there's multiple page limit differences from each institution, so that's not standardized. So you kind of have to keep very organized to like know what's due when, and making sure that you like hound your professors to get you your letters of rec in on time and that you have the correct format for this application. But at the same time, you're still a scientist. You're still doing your experiments. Maybe you're trying to get a paper out because it will help your application. So you're working these extra hours trying to do it at the same time, but also your personal life will keep lifing. So for me personally, my dad actually passed away right at the beginning of the academic job market for me. So I had to deal with all of that emotional stuff and then be like, okay, well, these deadlines are still here. Like they don't change them for me. So I'll just figure out the ones that I actually care about the most and let the rest go. So it's kind of just a revolving roller coaster of emotions too, because you also don't know if you're doing it right. Like you don't know if you're writing things the right way. It's like it's such a unknown territory that you kind of just have to jump into and hope for the best.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm glad you did get the actual position out of it to hopefully make all of that hard work and emotional roller coaster worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I'm very excited to be at Tufts. Like the whole community seems very excited. They've already invited me up. Like they're making a cancer symposium. It's like, oh, we'd love it if you like came up. I know you're not starting until next year, but to like connect with everyone else at Tufts, and it's a great feeling.
That's so sweet. I know you did bring up about your father, but aside from that, was there anything else unexpected during this process?
Just how emotionally taxing it is to write these documents. Because I don't know if this is just me, but I think when I wrote each one, I'm effectively envisioning myself at this place who would be my future colleague so I can write to that. And so it's again and again, you're almost imagining yourself moving to these different locations. And so it's just kind of like it's just really, really draining. And it takes way more time than you would expect it to. Even if you have these sorts of documents that you've written before from like different fellowships and like you've written parts of your grants or your research things somewhere else, just explaining it in a way because you don't know who's reading it is also very hard. So it's you're writing for an intelligent audience, but so for Tufts, for example, it's a general biology department. We have people that study singing in finches and like the neurobiology of how they do that. There's someone that like looks at how diversity like of butterflies or like animals exist in nature. There's evolutionary biologists. And then there's like DNA damage people, right? So it's everything in biology, and I have to write my research in such a way that everyone can understand and get excited about it. And so it's just a lot of mental energy going into that also makes it really exhausting.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't even imagine trying to put myself in a headspace to almost write to each different colleague, especially like you said, when you have such diverse departments covering all aspects of biology.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was different for like each university, depending on what department you're applying to and like how specific that is.
Yeah. So the job ads tend to say what they're looking for more, or just like some of it is just like a general realm of biology, or they might say like an emphasis in cancer biology is would be great or something like that. So because I'm combining these different fields, I didn't change my actual research plan, but I changed my introduction. So places that were more cell biology based, I kind of just talked about fibrosis and how it's a predisposition for so many different diseases and how understanding the cell biology is really important. But for the cancer focused places, I'm just like, hey, cancer's really bad. We need to understand what's happening. Versus the virology places, just like, what is a virus doing in a cell? We know it has to be in a cell in order for it to reproduce, but what else is happening? So it's just kind of tweaking the introduction ever so I had so many different versions of all of these documents that you then just go, okay, this place is looking for this. I will use this template. Now let me find the one that's the correct page limit.
You already mentioned a couple of things that I think people could take away, like make sure you stay very organized with your deadlines and prioritizing, and also like making sure you cater yourself to where you're wanting to go and the people you're going to be around. But is there any other like general advice you'd want to offer people? You mentioned there's a lot of like unknowns and you kind of have to jump in almost blind. So is there anything you can kind of like give to people who are in that position right now?
You will never feel ready. Just, you have to do it scared. You kind of just have to do it. So if this is a career that you want to pursue, just go for it. So I know that there's, ideals that people want is like, oh, I really wish I had this grant on my CV, or I wish I had these papers. I had no papers. Like I still do not have a first author postdoc paper. It's coming. It's coming. Tufts, I promise. I'm working on it. Etsy, I'm working on it. Right. But in terms of when I applied, I didn't have it out. I didn't have it as a preprint. I just had to go for it and just say, I need you all to just assume my competence that I can do it and just be really excited about what I'm doing. And so that's a really scary feeling, especially if you think that a paper is something that you can control. So if people are worried about whether they're in Science, Nature, or Cell, I didn't have any, right? So I definitely couldn't worry about what journal it was in because I didn't have like a first author paper at all. Like I did have other publications, like I contributed to other things with my lab mates. I had, book chapters that I was a first author on. So it's not that I had nothing. But I kind of just couldn't let my idea of what people were looking for limit what I do. So if you think about it this way, your job at this point is to do science and to put your best foot forward. Your job is not to say who gets that position. That is not in your pay grade. You're not getting paid to do that. So why would you self-eliminate yourself when that is literally not your job? So just go out there, do it scared, and you might get some bites, you might learn some things along the way and can always apply again and improve.
That was very powerful. Yeah.
Right? I definitely take that to heart. Now I'll write my thesis fueled by the scared,
Oh, I mean, a thesis writing, that's definitely scared, right? Like you never see a thesis and then you just have to do it.
Literally. So you did talk about the different institutions that you had interviewed with and kind of tailoring your application to those different institutions. But was there anything that you prioritized in the institutions that you were looking at?
So there's a lot of ways that you can prioritize things. And I think my prioritization is probably different than most. So when you apply, there are a lot of positions that will be there, and you don't have to apply to something that you fit 100% of what they say. Because sometimes a department doesn't actually know what they're looking for. They're like, yeah, we want a cell biologist that does this, but then you could come along and be like, hey, have you seen this really interesting like fly or cow model that I'm working on? And they're like, oh wait, that's actually really cool. Maybe we should take you instead. So with the job ads, there are so many different ones that are out there. Some people use a approach where they cast a very wide net and they'll apply to anything that remotely matches their CV and like what they want to do, no matter where the location is. I did not take that approach. Some people will stay geographically not isolated, but like within a geographic area because of family constraints or something like that. I didn't necessarily do that either. I went, where do I have friends? Being an adult and making friends is very hard. And I'm about to jump into a job where what I am trained to do is the smallest percentage of what that job actually is. I know how to do experiments, design and do experiments. I know how to write grants because I've also done that. But now I have to manage people. I have to teach them how to do all of the research. I have to do budgeting for like millions of dollars. Like that's not money I have access to. Like, so I'm budgeting on a different scale. Like, I might have to regulate other people's emotions just to be like, Tommy took the pipette. And I was just like, I don't know why I made them sound like they're 5. But like, just like so many other things that you're regulating. And then I have to be on committees and do service at the institution level, locally and internationally, because I'll be reviewed for that for my promotion. And it's just way more than what your job is right now. Who's going to have time to make friends? Like, no one's making friends for that. And there's no guarantee that your colleagues you'll also want as friends. Like, you can have great colleagues and them just not be your friends, and that's totally fine, right? They can have their own personal lives, family, if you don't have, little kids or something like that. And so their out of work life will just be very different from yours. So I prioritized being in a place that I would actually want to live and places that I already knew some people. So it'd be like, cool. Worst case scenario, I've got 2 friends there and they'll introduce me to their friends and I can work with that a little bit.
I like how you've incorporated like your personal life and relationships into your professional life, because I feel like people don't think of it as it's your whole life that you're moving.
Yeah,
And so you have to take that all into consideration.
absolutely.
We also wanted to ask about another important relationship as a postdoc with your like immediate supervisor. Kind of what resources were they able to help you with? Did they kind of just let you do things independently, or were they super supportive during this time, and kind of how you guys worked through that in that relationship?
Oh yeah, my postdoc advisor is absolutely amazing. She's an absolute gem, super supportive of me being on the job market. She read my materials. When I got to negotiation, she brought up things that I didn't consider to be like, oh, you should ask about XYZ thing, or oh, they told you this amount for your money. Make sure that this is separate from your salary, because the amount can seem inflated if it's also including your salary for like 3 to 5 years. Because then, right, if your salary gets taken out of that, you actually have much less to work with. And she's like, think about how you're going to do the contracting for your equipment. So I do microscopy, like both of my advisors did before me. She's like, think about the servicing contract. That's usually like 10% of what the actual device costs. So like all of these smaller things that I have no idea. She's just like, okay, they said this for your salary. Can you ask for more? And I'm just like, but this is a great salary. She's like, ask for more. Just do it. Like you won't get it unless you ask. And what's the worst they're gonna say? No. And then you go, okay, I'm happy with this, right? So every step she just helped me push further than what I would have a natural inclination to do. Probably because of being socialized as a woman and, all of how I might be perceived. But it was just kind of, you have to ask not for more than what you need, but absolutely ask for everything that you need. Because if you get less than that, you're not going to have a successful program. And then that makes everyone in a bad situation, because they were betting that you would be able to succeed and you thought you'd be able to succeed, but then they didn't provide enough support, and like no one wants to be in that situation. So, but she was just so helpful and so supportive. I think she like celebrated me getting a position like at 5 different lab meetings because different people were there each time. It was like, oh, I don't think you know this, but Jay's gonna sign. She does like hashtag Prodissima PI on Twitter all the time.
I have seen that, yeah.
She's super, super proud, and I love her so much.
Shout out to Etty, also a supporter of the Meshwork. She always likes all of our things, so big thanks to her. All right, so we did get to see your comic at the beginning, and you said you did all of that work yourself.
Yes.
So could you talk to us about your sci art and how you got started?
Yeah, so I actually started that when I was a grad student. So I co-founded a group called JKX Comics with 2 other people that were also at the University of Wisconsin at the time. So now we're all in different places doing different things. But here's an example of a book we made. and it's actually detailing research happening at the University of Wisconsin. So we do all sorts of, we're kind of on a break right now, hoping to restart in 2025 because, Kelly was finishing her PhD, Kwa and I were on the job market, like a bunch of us got married, like just so many life things happened that was like, we need to pause. But now we're all soon going to be in our new roles and positions, and life will settle down a little bit. But we do portraits and illustrations and mini comics of people for like the various history months. So like Women's History Month, Black History Month, Latinx History Month, um, just to kind of give a face to people that do really important things that we may not know about. And then this book is kind of an example of us talking about the people that are currently doing really cool research right now. Because if you think about it, I have no idea of all of the research that happens at my institution. And science in itself isn't just like this magic that happens and now we have a thing, right? There's actually people that are contributing to all of these things. So just kind of being able to detail the stuff that they do. So this is one that I drew of Edna Chang, and it was really sweet because I got to attend her PhD defense online, and she had this part of like the her plus squirrels equals graduation because she was defending. And she actually used a lot of different things from like the comic that we created together. So that was a really, really special thing. And yeah, so I love this. We have a book. You could find it. I don't want to plug it. That seems gross, but we have one.
But if people were interested and
Yes.
did want to look at it, because I'm interested,
Yes.
where would we find it?
So you can go to jkxcomics.com. So J, like the first letter of my name, K, like the first letter of Kelly and Kwa, and then X like a variable. So that's actually what our name is for. And then comics. And if you go underneath projects, you can actually read all of this for free. So we keep everything for free to not have the paywall barrier. And then we use the comic format to get rid of the jargon barrier. So no matter what, if you want to read this, you can go and read it for free. If you want the physical book, though, that you would have to pay for.
We'll see if we can plug it in the description of this video as well so people can follow the link. How has having this comic company really elevated your research or the understanding of the work that you do?
It helps so much for thinking of analogies and how to explain it to other people. So if we think back to what I was saying for the job market and how you have to be able to speak intelligently to a room full of people that do very different things, I feel like my work doing comics where I'm intentionally writing this to the level for an 8-year-old can understand. So obviously adults can understand too, but they don't have the schooling background at all, and I need to still make this accessible. That has really translated in how I can give presentations about my own science so that a wider audience can understand it. So just being able to present at multiple levels. Also just the drawing aspect, you have to make figures. So we make our comics, we use Adobe Illustrator a lot, which is not a standard drawing like most people use Photoshop or something else for drawing, but because we make figures for our papers and our presentations in Illustrator, we just applied those skills to making the comic. So it definitely has worked both ways, that the science has helped inform the comics and the comics has helped inform the science.
No, really cool. So you also showed us your lab logo at the beginning. Do you want to talk a little bit about the lab logo, specifically what it means or what different elements that you put into it?
Yeah, here, let me share it again so people can
bring it back
see
up.
it. Am I sharing the whole screen or just that? Okay.
Now it's your whole screen.
Okay. So are you seeing yourself twice right now?
No.
Okay, good. So for my lab logo, so I actually kind of had this as a logo even before my lab that I put on my CV because I like to personalize things and not have things look like everyone else. And this is a small way that I can make it more me. And so I used microscopes for both my PhD and my postdoc. I love microscopes. It really helps you visualize or make the invisible visible, right? And that's kind of the same thing that I do with comics and the whole idea of what we're doing with us behind the science enterprise. And so the way that I actually built this, other than just I love comics, is just thinking about, or I love comics. I love microscopes. I love both, but I meant microscopes. So other than just thinking about microscopes and my love for them, and lilies, those are my favorite flowers. Um, I I thought about all the different things that I do personally and that I care about. So if you think about the base, so there's going to be a lot of microscope puns here. So if you think about the base of the microscope, so the base of everything is education. So both being able to mentor people in the lab, but also the STEM education research that I've had a chance to do to improve outcomes for people and make sure that they really feel welcomed and that they belong in the lab and might want to further pursue and also be retained within a STEM career. If you think about the major arm of what I do, it's science. So that's the backbone of everything. It all connects to science, the science that we're doing, the science that we're communicating that other people do. We illuminate this through art. So just being able to highlight and see the science in a different way. And then I also like to take this through an idea or inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility lens. So making sure that I'm showing different people that are doing the type of work, so not just the same demographic of person all the time, that really it's this whole meshwork of people that create the science that we do. So that's kind of how my logo came to be.
I really love it.
Me too. And like I just love how thoughtful it is. Like even you're saying, you know, the arm of my work is this and the arm of the microscope is this. Like it's so clear how intentional you were when you
I
designed
also
it.
just, yeah, I just also like puns a lot.
Puns can be intentional.
They are, yes.
No, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to share with us? Any parting advice, parting message for those out there who will watch this?
You can do it. Just believe in yourself. I'm here on the side cheering you on. Doesn't matter if I know you or not. Just, you can do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you on behalf of both of us here today, and as well as the whole Meshwork team for taking time to chat with us. And we can't wait to see the amazing work that's going to come out of the Gardner Lab.
Yay.